Medical Courier Connection podcast is brought to you by Key Software Systems. We believe that every delivery has a story and it starts with you. That's why we built an ecosystem uniting accounting, delivery, tracking and shipping, reporting, and more to not only bring full delivery transparency to your customers, but to reduce errors and inefficiencies that stand in the way of over-delivering on your customer expectations. We'll drive the heavy lifting that keeps your business innovative with the latest technology so that you can focus on building connections with your customers. This podcast is also brought to you by Risk Strategies. Risk Strategies was founded in 1997 on the premise that an insurance brokerage could be more, a trusted risk management advisor and partner where a focus on employee and client needs would create value and success. Discover the difference of our specialist approach. We're here to help you see the way forward in a complex world with specialty insight, practical advice, and custom insurance with a vast network of specialists in property and casualty, employee benefits, private client, as well as consulting services and financial and wealth management solutions.
Hey everybody, hey everybody, hey everybody, hey everybody, Ken with Integrity, Ken with Integrity, Ken with Integrity, Ken with Integrity Medical Courier Training.
We are providing on-site training in Roseville, Minnesota.
A man's digits turn blue due to too much cannabis use. A woman in Melbourne, Australia dies after being scratched by Minty, her cat. Stole the hearse and dumped the body on the side of the road, still strapped to the gurney, and then continued on with their joyride. A dog had to be put down after it was crushed by a package thrown over a garden fence, its owners claim. So, stay compliant, my friends. Get all your medical courier training needs from us at www.integritydelivers.com.
Welcome back to the Medical Courier Connection podcast.
All right, yeah, absolutely. You know, we've been pretty busy. We've been traveling a little bit, and so our podcast schedule slacked off a little bit, but we are back and ready to go this morning. And we wanted to welcome back Brian Jungeberg from Risk Strategies. Courier insurance, commercial insurance for couriers is an absolute must. And, you know, we've got about 250,000 followers across our various social media platforms. And it seems that insurance, along with compliance, but insurance is one of those things that a lot of couriers, you know, they say, listen, I can't afford it. I'm just going to start without it. And so I'd love to talk about some of the risks involved in that and that mindset. So Brian, welcome.
Hey, thanks, Ken. Great to be here. Always appreciate getting to hang out with you guys. And, just on a side note before we start, guys at Key Software are some of the nicest folks that we get to talk to. Obviously, we all do a lot of shows together throughout the years and, know those guys well and would highly recommend them. So it was nice to hear they're also supporting what you're doing. And I think that's great. So thought I'd give them a plug.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, we're working hard to bring more sponsors in, to offer more products and services to our Medical Courier Connection members. We got about 1,400 members in the MCC and growing every day. And so that's pretty exciting. Patrick Scardilli is a drummer. And another side note, he's a drummer and I'm a guitar player. And we've been bantering around about maybe putting together an all-star like a CLDA all-star group where we play a bunch of classic rock hits. Maybe one of these years we'll get that together and get it done.
Oh, I love that idea.
Yeah, that'd be great. That'd be great. So I want to start off with the number one pain point for medical couriers. And so we got a bunch of questions, but I wanted to go with right off the bat and ask you, why is commercial auto insurance so expensive, or is it? We get that question a lot. A lot of new courier startups are kind of whining about it. And I'd like to know from your perspective, why is it so expensive, or is that just kind of an illusion?
Yeah, great question, right? We hear the same thing. And I can tell you that even in the last couple of days, and it probably ties back to working with you guys and doing a little more with MCC. You know, we've had some outreach from some folks that are looking for commercial insurance for their medical courier operation. So I always say, like, the blessing and the curse of the courier or final mile space is usually that the barrier of entry is just, I have a vehicle, right? So it's very easy to get into it, which is great. I think that the jump to your point about getting into commercial insurance and maybe having the right insurance or the right protection to protect your business and your assets, but also to protect your customers it can be a big jump. And it is a number that has done nothing but grow over the last 15 years. Right. So I was talking to somebody the other day, we were reminiscing about the good old days of insurance, and I can go back to the mid 2000s when commercial auto insurance for a vehicle for liability only was probably $3,000 a year.
Wow.
Right. Which is, we hear that number now and it's dirt cheap, because now the number has become $6,000 to $8,000 to $10,000, depending on where you are. And the reality is that I can sit here and say, because I live and breathe it every day in the insurance space, like those numbers are not crazy, high, but I understand that when you're coming from a personal auto policy where you spend $500 a year or $1,000 a year, that's a really big number. And I think the big reason, there's a lot of reasons for it, right? But if you take just into account what the exposure is from a personal auto policy basis to a commercial auto policy, that has a lot to do with it, right? Personal auto policy, take myself, for instance, I get to work from home. Where do I drive, right? I drive to the gym. I drive to run some errands. I take the kids places. I don't really drive a whole lot. Yep. Versus I'm a courier, medical courier. I'm doing deliveries all day long. I'm on the road all day long. I'm in traffic all day long. I might be in major metropolitan areas, right? There is just more exposure being on the road, more driving more every single day. So right. That's the starting point you're at right now. In the last 15 years, the commercial auto line of coverage, the liability line of coverage, across all transportation industry verticals, right? So you're talking delivery, you're talking trucking, you're talking distribution, you're talking anybody that's got wheels-based pieces to their business, has done nothing but lose the insurance industry money. So for every dollar of premium that's come in, the insurance space has lost $1.10. And this is going on now for more than a decade. And so what the insurers are doing are attempting to, every year they raise the rate a little bit more to try to get more premium in the mix in order to take care of the losses that are coming. At the same time, this cycle occurs because the way that claims work, especially larger ones, or they don't usually settle very quickly, right? So you and I get into an accident, it's a minor fender bender, it's probably a fairly quick deal, right? God forbid there was some serious bodily injury or fatality involved. All of a sudden that gets into the legal world, and now those things are going to drag on 1 or 2 years. So what was happening, and is still kind of happening with some of the insurers, is they have to judge once the accident occurs and the claim is submitted, hey, what do we think this is going to end up costing us? And there's a mechanism, and legally they have to do some things in the background with reserving money, setting aside money to pay the claims. Well, the more they have to reserve legally, it hurts their balance sheet. So they don't want to come out of the gate and say, you know what, Brian, you hit Ken and killed somebody. It's going to cost us $1 million. They're going to say, hey, it's, maybe $300,000 to $500,000, which sounds great. But the reality is when that goes through the whole legal process over the last few years, it really ends up being $1 million. And in some cases, we see things, and it's so frustrating for us too. And I know that the medical courier community is frustrated. You have a little fender bender, a little rear end accident, and you say, that's silly, this guy's not even hurt. And all of a sudden it's a $50,000 claim because they hurt their neck, or they claim they hurt their neck, and they have a doctor that's supporting that, right? Yeah. So those are the things that drive up all the costs further and further and further, especially on the liability side. And then on top of that, the compounding problem is technology in the vehicles, and the cost to build vehicles and repair them has all gone as well. So those pieces, look, the physical damage side, the collision stuff, that in the last 4 or 5 years, really since COVID, has just skyrocketed as well. So you got all those things in play.
Interesting. So one of my last questions was going to be, what's the number one misconception about the insurance industry that you'd change if you could? And I think you already answered the question. The perception out there is that the insurance industry is making billions of dollars and they're not paying claims and everybody's left in the lurch. Yeah. What do you think about that?
Yeah, that's it, right? I mean, this sounds crazy, right? We like to pay claims. We want to pay claims. That's what we're here for, right? And what I always say to folks is, it's not about, when the claim happens, the first question I get is not how much does it cost, right? The question is it covered? So I think there's a big, our stance on it is we want you to know what is covered and what isn't. And we're going to give you those options at the start, right? It's not my business. I'm going to tell you, if you ask me what should I do, I will give you the professionally speaking, here are the coverage I think are very important based on what you tell me you do every day. But ultimately, you're running your business. If you can only afford or only want to do certain coverages, that's fine. I'm not going to stop you. I just want you to know what's out there that might sting you or might not be covered, right? And I think that's the case, that most people, like, we just take the money, we never pay the claims. I mean, I would tell you half of my job, half of my inbox on a daily basis is involvement with claims. So the claims are definitely happening. I'm happy when people say I've never had a claim in a decade. No, great. Keep the streak up, right? Keep doing what you're doing. I hope you never have one, but unfortunately they all occur.
So again, we're on social media pretty regularly, and a lot of people will say, you know what, I can't afford insurance. I'm not doing commercial. I'm just going to stay with my personal policy. Can you unpack for me, that scenario that you talked about? You're driving, we're both out there driving, you hit me and someone, God forbid, expires because of it. What does that look like if someone is out there delivering packages in their personal car on their personal insurance? What does that look like on your end?
Yeah. So the problem in the space with that plan or that approach now is that all of the insurers are getting very, very good with technology and implementing that in their claims process. Okay. And Progressive is probably the first one. And they're the first one on a lot of things when it comes to tech. They've always been very tech forward. What used to happen, if we go back to the really, really, really old days of the early 2000s when I got into this space, right?
Way back when, yeah.
Yeah, right. We were still Nextels, two-way radios, not cell phones, right? It was when the accidents occurred and the drivers only had personal insurance, they didn't look like they were doing anything but running an errand, right? Sure. And so the claim happens, they just, fudge it a little bit and say, look, I was just out, I was doing, an error. Okay, personal insurance can't prove it otherwise, so it just pays the claim. Mm-hmm. Well, as cell phone usage starts to get going, and now we've got, changes in vehicles to more looking like little cargo vans and vehicles, not little sedans anymore. We've got Sprinters. And now we also have the Postmates and Ubers and Lyfts of the world come into play, and everybody understands an independent contractor. Now the insurers are going, well, hold on now. There's a lot more out there between cell phone data, TMSs or dispatch systems, like anything that they can now ask for in a claim, they're going to ask for to figure out if what the driver was doing, right? Were they working? Were they not working? Okay. Personal auto insurance policies all have an exclusion for business use, meaning you use your vehicle all day long to drive and make deliveries. That's technically business use. So that's what a Progressive, and I can give you Progressive, Geico, there's a bunch of them now. They'll ask for all of this information or subpoena for it if the accident is large enough to prove, hey, look, you were using your vehicle a different way than you told us you were when you bought the policy. And there's an exclusion there. We're out, right? Respectfully, this isn't our problem. Good luck with it. Yeah, that is a big deal. And we're seeing it more and more insurers doing it.
Okay. So the insurance company denies the claim. What happens then?
Nothing good. Two approaches, right? If you're just a single driver, you're going to have some issues, right? I don't know, it depends on what your assets look like, but you're basically left uninsured and you're going to be paying for defense on your own or whatever it is. It gets really ugly, I think, for the small individual operator if they don't, you're gambling and you lost at that point, right?
Yeah.
And possibly have lost everything you own as well, which is a scary thought. For a medical courier company that say has a batch of independent contractor drivers that drive for them to do deliveries, that's where the hired and non-owned auto kicks in to protect the company, right? So I think that's one of those items, just like commercial auto for a vehicle. The hired and non-owned auto is a must-have item in our opinion when you're utilizing independent contractors, or if you're in California and you can't have ICs and you have employee drivers who drive their own vehicles, that's still a hired and non-owned exposure. And the medical courier company needs to have that in place to protect them if they get dragged into a claim or a lawsuit.
Okay, hired not owned, is that considered an umbrella policy then?
No, not in the sense of what most people would consider to be an umbrella, right? We all picture the Traveler's Red umbrella. It covers you. It's great. This is very specific to if IC gets in an accident using their own vehicle and you as the courier company are brought into that situation. That's what the hired and non-owned very specifically covers is, look, we're the courier company. We did dispatch this job. We did not tell that driver to run a red light and kill somebody. We're sorry that it happened. But, we work no different than, 10,000 other companies across the United States. We follow certain guidelines. And part of what we do on the front end, Ken, is we're working with those companies to put them in a defensible position to make sure that they're doing things at the same level or better than their competition across the country. So that when the claim happens, we can sit there and say with them, hey, look, we're doing it better than most. And here's why this is not our fault. We're sorry about it, but this wasn't on us. This was on the driver. They're their own business person. Yeah.
Very, very interesting. We had an accident. Well, we did not. I had an IC that was driving for me years ago in the Midwest. And he was distracted driving and went through a four-way stop and it took someone's life. And he had a small amount of commercial insurance, but then they came after the company, of course.
Yep.
And so that's something that you have to prepare for. We see, this is interesting, because around the country, we're seeing a kind of a uptick in accidents with semi-truck drivers that don't speak English, don't understand signage, don't understand rules of the road, things like that. We've seen it recently, and I'm just kind of wondering what happens with that scenario. I would guess that the trucking company that is using those drivers is then ultimately responsible for that.
Yeah, it is. And the truck space operates a little differently. They like master fleet policies. So if you're an owner operator with your own rig, right? Typically you're scheduling onto the trucking company that you're working for onto a master policy, right? For liability. It's not because commercial vehicles, anything over 10,000 GVW has to have a commercial policy. That's the way that everybody in the truck space says, like, we'll make sure you have coverage to the limits we want. We'll not leave this to any risk. The final mile space and medical courier stuff is different from the standpoint that you're in private passenger vehicles. You're kind of in this gray area where you can get away with a little bit more of that wiggle room and not have to have commercial insurance. There are companies out there that run their deliveries firms like a trucking company, and they schedule on vehicles. It's just obviously you have a cost associated with that. So that's something that for a lot of folks doesn't work, but it is an option.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about levels of coverage, because I remember when we owned Integrity Medical Couriers, we did a lot. We serviced LabCorp and Quest and different laboratories. And I remember specifically the amounts of coverage that they required the courier company to have was, I remember, I think LabCorp was 100,000, 300,000, and then Quest was 1 million, 3 million. Can you talk about those different policies and what that is?
Yeah, those are two of my favorites. And I'll tell you why at the end of it, because it's something I think that's really specific to the medical courier space that is misunderstood. So don't let me forget to say that. But
right.
on the auto side of the limits, right? In the old days, they had lower limits. They would go the 100, 300 limits on the auto. Now, I don't know any medical lab or health system that's allowing anybody to have less than $1 million on the auto side of things.
Okay.
And I think that speaks to they see the claims activity as well, especially if they've tried to run their own fleet of vehicles and do the lab work themselves.
Mm-hmm.
They learned that lesson the hard way, that that's not as easy as they think or as cost effective as outsourcing it to professionals. So yeah, we see $1 million is pretty much the standard now.
What's the low number mean and what's the high number mean?
So on a split limit, 100,000 would be a per person bodily injury number, right? Per accident. So you have 100 per person. Okay. You have 300 total for the accident. Okay.
Okay.
So you could have 3 people injured at 100,000 and you get to your 300 that way, right? Commercial wise, we like to just have the set $1 million limit. So if you had someone injured at 500,000 and someone injured at 50,000, you still got the coverage and you're not deficient anywhere. It gives you more flexibility.
Sure. I mean, if you're willing to pay up to $3 million for a catastrophic, incident, how many of those happen in a year? How many of those do you guys typically see?
More than you would think, right? And that's I would tell you at least 24.
Wow.
I mean, I have a fatality one that just occurred on the first of the month. Unfortunate kind of incident where a driver was making a delivery, was going kind of down a road where there was a county fair happening. Oh. And an elderly woman came out into the crosswalk. It wasn't that he was doing anything wrong. Unfortunately hit her. She ended up passing away. And now it involves, right? Let's talk about everybody involved on this. Obviously the estate of the person that passed away, unfortunately, the IC driver, the delivery company that hired the IC driver, the customer of the delivery company, and both the county and the city that this occurred in, because there is some finger pointing, so to speak, about how they had the crosswalk set up. Was it, so it gets that this thing now started, this occurred the 1st of October. I would tell you that it's probably a 2 to 3 year cycle before that actually all settles out.
Okay. In the midst of that, you've got court cases, you've got all that's going on and the costs that are involved in that. So, I mean, I went straight to the payout. Okay, what's it going to cost? But I'm not seeing the litigation that goes on and the cost of the lawyers and the meetings and the documents and discovery and technology and all of that that's being pulled in.
So I think an important feature of looking at coverage, because there's people that have come into the marketplace to offer the hire to non-owned, which is a lot of what we do, right? And some of those insurers put the defense within the policy limit. Okay, so here's what that means. To your point, we have $1 million policy. However, in this claim, it may cost us $500,000 for the defense of all this. Yeah. So if we have the defense cost within the policy limit of $1 million and it costs us $500,000 to defend it, when it's all said and done, we only have $500,000 of protection, which is like no one really. If this is the problem we see, right? Though that is a big detail that you can take care of fairly easily. Yeah. But if you deal with a broker that specializes in the space and understands the exposures that you have and the policy setups, that's a really bad surprise at the end of it. So we are very big on saying, hey, look, defense outside of the limits. So it may take $1 million to defend this, but you'll still have $1 million of coverage at the end. And then you obviously could buy an excess liability or an umbrella policy and expand your limits of protection, right? And it would track the same way. So
Sure. Yeah, I think the insurance industry, the old saying used to be, everybody wants a hot dog, but no one wants to know what goes into making it, right? We just want to eat the hot dog at a ball game, and I don't want to think about where it came from and what's in it. Insurance is like, I mean, people think about the big payout. People sue. We're in a litigious, happy society. People sue for anything and everything, and they just think of that. Here's the payout. They don't think of everything that happens in between and the costs that are involved in that.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought it up. It's a great point. The other thing that gets my goat with the medical courier space specifically, and go back to those two labs that we mentioned.
Yes,
their contracts would always stipulate you got to have $1 million in cargo coverage, right? Mm-hmm. The funny part about that, Ken, is the $1 million of cargo coverage is not protecting what they really want to protect. Okay. So let's unpackage that.
Yeah.
I'm a courier for you. I have a biopsy, right? That we're taking.
Yeah.
Okay. I screw up. The biopsy is unable to be used. We can't go back and get more. We don't know, right? Now the patient of the lab doesn't know if they have cancer or what. Okay.
Yeah.
Cargo will provide zero protection under that. Okay. Because what's going to happen is the patient is going to come back to the healthcare system and all of us, and they're going to sue for mental anguish, emotional distress, all of these items. Okay.
Right.
What covers that is actually a professional liability policy, or you'll hear it called errors and omissions.
There it is.
Or think about it like malpractice coverage. Okay. That is what covers the consequential or financial damages you might have for that emotional stress, mental anguish type claim. But none of the labs ask for that. Very few of the healthcare systems ask for that. They just assume, oh, you're moving something, cargo coverage is what to have, right? So I've always said this to folks in the medical space. Hey, look, it's when you're first starting, it's not that it's a cheap policy because it's still going to cost you a couple $1,000s.
Okay.
But I've always said, hey, you would be better off to buy this errors and omissions policy and sit down with your customer and explain why you went and bought it without them asking for it, and how it protects them and their patients, and use it as a sales tool, and really ingrain yourself with them. Are like, oh, wow, these guys really care about us and they want to do the right thing, and grow the business that way and use that as a tool in sales versus, here's your $1 million in cargo. We all know it doesn't cover anything. Let's just move on with life.
Yeah.
So that's a Brian pet peeve of the medical space. And it's not from the courier side, right? It's from the attorneys that work for the labs and the healthcare systems, not understanding, what the exposure really is.
Okay. Let me see how well I'm listening here. Would you recommend that a cargo carrier, someone who's got a Sprinter van, I mean, where's the balance between E&O and cargo? Are you saying it's a both? It's not an either or?
It's not, you can do both and you should, right? Because there are some things that would be covered, especially we all know, right? Besides blood, urine, lab samples, tissue, whatever, organs even, you might move other items, right? You're going to probably move some medical supplies and things like that.
Open-sided MRI machine. They cost
$1 million.
Absolutely. Tipped over in the cargo van, it's destroyed. Who's paying for that?
And that's a cargo claim. That's a cargo loss that will be covered.
Okay.
The part that's hard with the lab stuff is what's it worth, right?
Yeah.
What's the value? How do you put a value to it? Hair, blood, urine. We just go back and we get more. There's a cost involved, but it's minimal. We're not happy to do it, but we can do it, and it's fairly cheap.
Right.
Okay. Usually under the deductible.
Yeah.
Okay. It's what's an organ worth? What's what's a cancerous cell worth? We don't know. We can't put a value on that.
In that scenario that you described, where and by the way, I have several clients that are pathology lab clients, right? So tissues, cancer detection, they're all about it. As a matter of fact, I was at the Courier company about a month ago, and one of their drivers discovered a pap smear specimen in the back of one of their cargo vans for the company. I won't mention the name. It's a great company, but the pap smear is looking for abnormal cells. I mean, that's why people get pap smears, to see if there's any, what's going on here. I mean, is there a risk of cancer? That specimen sat in the vehicle for 6 days. Yeah. That's 6 days that they didn't get to diagnose, see the abnormal cells, let's start a treatment plan. That's 6 days lost in the life of that patient. And it really could be the matter of life and death. And that's what my pathology labs are emphatic on, that a lost tissue sample could result in catastrophic loss of life. No two ways about it. And couriers have to understand that.
Yeah. No, and the other part that we didn't even touch on with the professional liability or errors and omissions policy is coverage for privacy and HIPAA related type violations. Sure. Right. Because that sometimes those go hand in hand with cargo losses, where it's, you know, we don't know where the sample is, but it's not in our vehicle and it's got patient information all over it. So you have that other part of it with, hey, now and God forbid it's a high profile figure, a celebrity. Right. We don't know if we've released something that could be detrimental to them. So that's certainly part of it. That's been, ever since you go back to HIPAA high tech type stuff, that coverage has been built into a professional liability policy that's done the right way, and offered protection. So another reason to have it.
Chris and I were at the ADLM conference a year ago. ADLM is one of the nation's largest clinical labs. As a matter of fact, they bring in people from all over the world, but they set up laboratories in this convention center, and they're selling products to support the lab industry. And we were there 2 years ago. Now, we've been there the last 2 years in a row. But last year when we were there, I got a frantic call from one of my clients in Texas, and one of their couriers misdelivered a box of medications, and there was patient paperwork with it, misdelivered it. So the address was 938 whatever lane, and he delivered it to 936. I mean, it's, you know, didn't see it quite right. Well, the neighbor opened it up, discovered what it was, called the pharmacy. That's exposure one. The pharmacy calls the courier company, says, send your driver back. You know, they've misdelivered the package. The courier picks up the package, misdelivers it a second time.
Come on.
I'm like, what are the odds? And now everybody's in an uproar. The pharmacy is pursuing it as a HIPAA violation, and for good reason. And, you know, the thing is, I asked, now this was a long-term client of mine. And I asked him, I said, so tell me, you do have active BA agreements in place with your contractors? And the phone went silent. And I went, oh, hello. And he's like, no, we've never drafted BA agreements with our contractors. And I was stunned. So we had to fix that. We had to remedy that right away. But tell me more about the liability in that situation. 2 missed deliveries, 2 people have been exposed to sensitive PHI. Where does that go? Because is it really up to the pharmacy, how far they want to push it? Is it up to the patient where they think their rights have been violated? How does that flesh out?
Great question. It's kind of both, man. Like, so you'll see the pharmacy, obviously their first thing is, we want to protect the patient, rightfully so. Okay, so they're going to start pushing it. You have to offer to the patient, hey, look, there was a potential breach here. Here's an offer for credit monitoring and that kind of thing, to make sure that none of that was taken and used nefariously. So I've seen it go away quickly, because the patient's like, yeah, cool, we'll do this. And I think we're in a spot where when all of that HIPAA high-tech stuff was first rolling out, it was very much on the front burner and front of mind for everybody. And there were a lot of breaches, and collectively as a society, which is sad and encouraging at the same time, we got smarter about managing data and securing it. And we don't see as many of those losses anymore, right? The way that we did then. Yeah. So we're better at it. I think where the world went with the criminals was, it's easier to, you know, go after an individual and bilk them by, masking that I work for somebody else and you got to transfer me money, than it is to go after a large corporate enterprise. Right. Not to say they don't look for the opportunity with the corporate enterprise. It's just harder now because everybody's more dialed into it and the security measures are better. So it tends to be the take up. This goes back a lot of years, so it's probably changed since then, Ken. But if you had a massive privacy breach, they used to say only about a quarter to a third of the affected parties or potentially affected parties would do the credit monitoring. So you offered it to 1,000 people, right? Only 25% of them would actually take you up on that and do it. The rest just kind of either ignored it, didn't feel like there was risk, or said, forgot to do it. So it just depends on the patient involved, what they had to lose, what it was, who the lab was. It can be nothing. It can be a lot of something.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And so, people need to be, and couriers especially, just need to, this is all about risk management. And the question is, how much do I want to protect myself? People think, look, I'm just getting started. I want to make the maximum amount of money that I can. What's the first thing to go? Insurance. Not going to need it. You don't need it until you need it. And there's a lot of bad advice on social media. We fight against it all the time. For example, we know a guy that recently on social media said, hey, medical couriers, you don't need dry ice. Dry ice is old school. And I'm like, well, it depends on what you're carrying. It depends on what you're transporting. You very well may need dry ice. So I had to do a video to counter that bad advice. There's been a lot of bad ideas floating around out there. And I'm emphatic with my followers that not getting commercial insurance, if you're going to drive your vehicle for hire, not getting commercial insurance is a bad idea. It doesn't end well. And so,
couldn't agree more.
That's my advice. And
you want to be able to sleep well at night, right? Like you can make a lot of money, and if you've got to feel like you sleep with one eye open because you're afraid of the other shoe dropping, that's not a great way to live, right? I think we, obviously you and I have been through the wars on claims and seen ugly things in our days, so we're going to have a different opinion on this than some. But I wholeheartedly agree with you, right? It's not worth the grind every day to try to make the money to give it all back because you were being penny wise and pound foolish. Protect your business, grow your business. You do it the right way. You cultivate the right relationships. It will pay in spades, and you can still protect it, right? You can absolutely still protect it and do it the right way. So.
Yeah, absolutely. So when I'm telling couriers, we talk about sales and we talk about, marketing your services and pricing your services. When a medical courier is looking at a bid or looking to price their services, factor in commercial insurance. Just factor it into what you need as part of what you need, your overhead. It's just part of what you need to do business, communications, insurance, your equipment, coolers, gloves, communication, scanners, all of that. It's all part of the cost of doing business. You can't skimp on it because like you said, they could lose everything.
Yeah. And we're happy to talk with folks when they're looking at bids and they're wondering, what is it going to cost? How do I do this? That's a very straightforward, easy thing for us to ballpark, right? So you have an idea. And we're always going to be conservative on it. So if it works in your numbers with a conservative number, we can go through and get the coverage done. And usually I would tell you 99% of the time it ends up cheaper. So we're going to set you up, hopefully, to be successful and win the business and still protect everything that you've worked hard to build and set you on a good path. So just reach out. Happy to chat about it.
Absolutely. One last question. So you touched a little bit on, sometimes people are shooting for the cheapest policy. The cheapest policy I want to get, that's where I'm going. Is there a misconception there? Like, are there Cadillac policies? Are there cheapest policies that will get you by?
Yeah, there is, right? There are ways to craft things that there are more coverage in it versus less coverage. There are the cheap carriers and the more expensive carriers where they automatically build in some things. So you have to weigh all those. I think that it's a misconception that, they're giving you a bunch of stuff you don't need. Okay. They're not. The only place I would tell you that applies in the insurance world specific to metal couriers is general liability insurance. And that's just because general liability insurance is kind of the old standard, and the insurers just treat all the industries the same, right? And there are some things in there that people build in that you'll never use, but it doesn't save you any money to take them out. They're not going to give you a credit back, right? Your big ones in this space are going to be your auto liability, your cargo, and then if you decide to do a professional liability or errors and emissions policy. Those are ones where there are various degrees of coverage. And if you want more coverage included, it will probably cost you a little bit more. But I wouldn't say it's going to double your cost, right? We're not talking about a gigantic difference.
Okay. One last question. There's something that just occurred to me. So are there insurance providers out there that, I mean, I don't know, maybe this might be a question that you don't want to answer, but, but, insurance companies that, they're going to do everything they can to skirt around a payout, because obviously if they're paying out, money, they're losing money. You talked about, how that for every dollar that that is claimed or whatever, you're paying out $1.50 or whatever. But are there, I hate to ask this question.
I don't mind answering that. Okay. Yeah, I'll tell you this. If you recognize an insurer from a commercial, on TV, I will tell you that those are the ones that tend to fight the most to pay the least.
Oh my gosh.
So it's not to say they're bad. They're big, and they have big books to defend, and they tend to have a lot of attorneys on staff, and that becomes what their job is in claims. So we in our space, in this space with medical couriers, we like boutique insurance carriers who understand the space. And before we ever start working with them, we go through a long process of vetting and explaining how our clients do what they do, so that there's no misconception at a claim where they could say, we had no idea they were doing this, right? So I think it's a kind of a couple different steps in that process, Ken. But yeah, there are certainly insurers that I would tell you, if you recognize them and they tell you they understand what you're doing as a courier, they probably don't, and it could end poorly.
Wow. Are underwriters bad people?
No, they're not. They really aren't. They aren't. They have a job to do. I think they try to understand what the risk is. And again, I've been doing this a long time. Some of my best friends in the industry are actually underwriters I work with. And it's just, it is a people business. You have to work through it with them. You have to be very upfront with them about what is. The worst thing you could do is talk them into something and have it go sideways. Or from a client level, don't hide anything that you're doing, right? Yeah. You just want to know what it is so we can figure out the best way to cover it. Always share the breadth of what you're doing, and it'll get you to a good result.
Boy, that's a great point. Yeah, there's a misconception that underwriters are evil people, and they're just there to protect the interest of the insurance company, protect that pile of money. And it's pretty interesting. I love talking about the industry. I love the medical courier industry, and you guys provide such a vital role, and it's often overlooked. And we're really thankful for our relationship with Risk Strategies, and I appreciate you coming back on. Is there anything else you wanted to cover that we didn't cover today?
No, I don't think so. I appreciate the time, and obviously thrilled to be able to support MCC and everything you guys do. We've been great, colleagues and friends through the years, and love doing it. We'll do it anytime. I will tell you, you'll see next year this Risk Strategies name will probably give way to Brown & Brown, because we were acquired by them in the summer. So there's a phase out going on, but same team here. Nothing's changed. We've been through name changes before, but just to be aware of that for everybody. So if you don't watch this until the spring of 26 and you go, Risk Strategies isn't even around anymore, what happened? It'll be Brown & Brown.
Excellent. Well, listen, we will continue to send people to you. You, as a sponsor of the MCC, we train new companies, probably 3 to 5 every single week. New companies that come on, and insurance is something that we're constantly referring people to, and we'll continue to do that. So
we appreciate that very much, and happy to chat with them. You're a friend of Ken's, you're a friend of ours, and we will look out for you.
Excellent. Brian, thank you so much. Appreciate your time today. Have a great weekend, and we will see you out there on the road in the circuit, I'm sure.
Looking forward to it. Thanks, guys.
Awesome. Thank you. And so if you are listening to the podcast, the audio podcast is available on Apple Podcasts, the Podbean app, Spotify, Amazon Music and Audible, iHeartRadio, Player FM, and Podchaser. And if you're watching on YouTube, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel. We have an entire playlist of MCC podcast episodes, so you can get your fix. Anything else, Ken?
No, this was so informative.
Yeah.
And again, the thing is, you guys, and I'm going to tell you this day in and day out, skimping on insurance is not a good idea. It is a bad idea. And I'm going to continue to shout it from the rooftop because it is about what could happen and you could lose everything. So let's do it right. Let's be insured from the very beginning. That is a good idea.
Mm-hmm. Awesome, and we will see you all next week.
Hey everybody, Ken with Integrity Medical Courier Training here.
And this is what's happening, right? So with such a serious subject, but he's able to inject humor. So it's in our best interest to invest not only in safety, but give some of those dividends back to the drivers.
I'm like, how do you start this medical carrier stuff? And nobody had a mentorship. Nobody told me what industry events to go through.
So I was thinking like I need a name for my first conference. And it just dawned on me, use the name that they keep calling me. And I was like, yeah, the Boss Maker Conference.
You're learning so many important things, and I'm so proud of you.
Yeah, that sounds a bit expensive. I think I'll just train them myself. After all, this isn't rocket science.
And we have liftoff of Antares.